Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his forces have killed a senior leader of Hamas as the region marks 600 days of war. Mohammed Sinwar, who is the head of Hamas's armed wing, was killed in a recent Israeli strike in Gaza, according to Netanyahu. He is the younger brother of Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind of the October 7th attacks, who was killed by Israeli forces last October. President Trump was asked Wednesday if he had any frustration with Netanyahu after calling for an end to the war and the growing humanitarian crisis there.
No, we're dealing with the whole situation in Gaza. We're getting food to the people of Gaza. It's been a very nasty situation, very nasty fight. October 7th was a very nasty day, the worst that I think I've ever seen. It was a horrible day, and people aren't going to forget that either.
Let's bring in former U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Dan Shapiro, who served under former President Obama. He's also a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Ambassador, thank you for being here. What's the significance of this announcement from Netanyahu, and do you think it has any bearing on the prospects of a ceasefire, either temporary or permanent?
Mohammed Sinwar was the leader, military leader of Hamas, who took over after his brother was killed. A very brutal figure who's caused great suffering to Israelis on October 7th and to Palestinians who have been brutalized by Hamas's rule. But the elimination of that level of leadership does open a path toward a ceasefire. President Trump really has the opportunity, I think, at this point, to do what he says he wants, which is to see the war come to an end by insisting on a full hostage deal, all hostages being released, and a ceasefire. He'd have to make assurances that Israel could still defend itself from Hamas if there were still attacks, and he'd have to work with Arab states, like the ones he just visited 2 weeks ago in the Gulf, on a plan to exile the remaining Hamas leaders and fighters from Gaza, because Gaza can't be ruled by Hamas going forward. That would also open a path to do things like renew progress on Israeli-Saudi normalization. But Trump is really going to have to lean in to get all the sides to agree to that kind of ceasefire deal right now.
We had seen conflicting reports about a supposed U.S.-led ceasefire plan that Hamas had accepted that would see the release of 10 living hostages in stages, also some deceased hostages returned to Israel. What do you see as being potential terms that Israel would agree to?
Well, the better path is that full ceasefire deal and full hostage release deal that would end this conflict. But if that's not possible, there is a path toward potentially a partial deal, about 10 hostages released for about 40 or 50 days of ceasefire. That's not perfect. It will still leave many hostages still their lives at risk. It will bring us back to the same point we're at about 2 months from now. And there's the risk that if Hamas and Israel can't get on the same page on those terms, that we're going to see the Israeli military continue to advance into Gaza, putting more hostages' lives at danger, putting more Palestinian civilians at danger, with an unproven aid delivery plan still trying to get launched, and the possibility that this war could really turn into a full Israeli occupation of Gaza.
The European Union's top diplomat said Wednesday that Israeli strikes in Gaza go beyond what's necessary to fight Hamas. What do you say of that criticism?
I think that the best path is to bring this war to an end, still with the plan and the commitment of all parties to get Hamas removed from power in Gaza. There's no question, though, as if this operation continues, Israel is going to be increasingly isolated. Obviously, we've heard some of that from European partners in the last several days. I'm also worried that Arab states, who we need to be participants in the exile of Hamas leaders and fighters from Gaza and the reconstruction of Gaza for a more responsible Palestinian leadership that wants to live in peace alongside Israel, won't participate if Israel is drawn further into an occupation conflict within Gaza.
You mentioned the current aid program right now. The UN has warned the people of Gaza are facing catastrophic levels of hunger. We know that this new U.S.-backed group has begun distributing aid. It's been operating in just 4 locations compared to the UN, which distributed aid around some 400 sites. What's your assessment of what's happening?
The jury's still out. The priority has to be to get aid and food and medicine and other requirements into Gaza so that Palestinian civilians can benefit from it. One of the problems has been that Hamas has stolen that aid frequently, has used it for its own purposes, and used it for political power over Gazans who live under its brutal rule. So this is an untested new methodology to try to bring aid directly to the people. It's going to have some very rough early days, and hopefully they can smooth that out, because the delivery of the aid is what's important.
All right, Ambassador Dan Shapiro, thank you.